Hi everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. In this video, we're going to go over a couple interesting emails that I received. One has to do with a recent devotional at Utah Valley University with Elder Gong and his wife, where some interesting things were said. And then we're going to look over another email that points us to something interesting that President Hinckley said during the General Conference, that President Nelson and President Oaks were sustained as apostles, and he gives a definition of a hinge point in that talk. And then at the end, we're going to go over the next misconception about the second coming, which is you will have to literally fight your neighbor in combat, or your other option is to flee to the New Jerusalem in Jackson County, Missouri, for physical safety. Okay, before we get into it, I said in the last video I was going to have an update on the Flood the Earth Challenge, but things have been a little crazy today, so I haven't been able to do that. Believe it or not, it does take time to go and find everybody's comments and then put it on the tracker and do all the updates. So I'll try and have that for you next time. We're at 6,569 copies of the Book of Mormon that have been shared. And we're at 696 people that have joined. I'm hoping that once I update this, we'll hit 700. And if we have, then I'll do the purple highlights, because that's the next milestone. All right, but good job, everybody. Okay, so the first email, this is from Ben here. I do want to point out really quick, I do this from time to time. Notice that my inbox has 1,509 emails, which is great. I always appreciate people emailing me. I try and get through as many as I possibly can. And I do, once I'm through it, once I responded, I delete it. So, but it is a little impossible for me to get to every email. And I just have to use my best judgment with, what looks interesting, what might be good for a video. So if I don't respond to your email, do not take it personally. I'm limited. I'm only human. And these are only the ones that are not open yet. I have 2,295 that have been opened. That includes a number that I haven't deleted. I read it, but I haven't deleted it. So I get a lot of emails. Okay, but this one is from Ben here. Jared, I appreciate your work on examining even the smallest details that point to Christ's coming in glory. Here's another one for you might want to consider. On Sunday, September 17th, U.S. Constitution Day. And I might add, again, that's the day that the 3 temples were dedicated, the first time in history. It's also the day that we had those vineyards in Spain get destroyed by hail. And it was also the second day of Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. So a lot was going on that day. Not to mention it was the 17th. If it turns out that was actually a special day of some sort, we think about President Nelson and him being the 17th president of the church. So just another interesting thing. Anyway, so on that day, Elder Gong and his wife spoke at a special devotional for students at the UVU Institute. There were 3 things mentioned that stuck out to me, 4 if you consider it happening on Constitution Day. Now, it's not that I don't believe you've been here, but with anything that gets sent in to me, I always like to verify if I can. And yeah, there was in fact a devotional there on the 17th, according to UVU's website. So this did really happen. Again, not that I doubted you, but I think I do everybody a service when I verify as much as I can. Okay, so Ben has 3 points. Here's point number 1. At the end of Sister Gong's talk about overcoming hardships, she said, quote, "If you just watch to the end of the movie, which is not at the end of this life, but watch to the end of the movie, there is a happy ending for you. Jesus will be with you and bless you." So the way that Ben took it, it could be a hint toward the second coming, because, if she's talking literally that Jesus will actually be here and blessing people, then she may not be referring to anything else other than actually the second coming. All right, Ben continues, to me, this is a dual reference to resurrection slash exaltation after death, and the promise that those living when Christ is crowned king will not taste of death, but will be changed in the twinkling of an eye. After all, if the movie doesn't end at death, is it possible we just don't die before it ends? I don't know. I wish I could have been there to hear the whole thing, but the way that I take it, she's talking to a living audience, and so she's like, just watch to the end of the movie. And some people may take that as like, oh, okay, keep doing this until I die. But then she specifies, no, not when you die, but but watch to the end of the movie. There's a happy ending for you. Jesus will be with you and bless you. So I do think that refers to the second coming. Yes, at the same time that there's the first resurrection, and therefore exaltation for those that are worthy of a celestial resurrection. There will be the quickening where those that are alive are changed and move into a quickened state. So I don't know, but that's kind of exciting. Okay, number 2, Elder Gong spoke on strengthening our personal foundations before shakings come. In his talk, he shared this quote by President Nelson from the October 2021 General Conference. And it says, "We are sparing no effort to give this venerable Salt Lake City temple, which had become increasingly vulnerable, a foundation that will withstand the forces of nature into the millennium. In like manner, it is now time that we each implement extraordinary measures, perhaps measures we have never taken before, to strengthen our personal spiritual foundations. Unprecedented times call for unprecedented measures." I wanted to just verify that quote and that talk. And I came to find out, because I searched for the term extraordinary measures, because that kind of stuck out to me. And it turns out he's used that twice, once in 2020 and once in 2021. So in 2020, he says, "We have undertaken a major project to extend the life and capacity of the Salt Lake Temple. Some question the need for taking such extraordinary measures. However, when the Salt Lake Valley suffered a 5.7 magnitude earthquake earlier this year, this venerable temple shook hard enough that the trumpet on the statue of the angel Moroni fell." And we've talked about that quite a bit and the implications of that on this channel. So it's interesting that 2 times, now it may just be his pattern of speech. I don't know, but I think it's interesting that he uses that phrase 2 times in talking about the Salt Lake Temple, which it does seem pretty obvious that it's being prepared for the second coming and he didn't say the second coming. He just said to last into, well, I guess that goes together. Withstand the forces of nature into the millennium. So yeah, to the second coming and into the millennium. Although I would say this as a word of caution, I wouldn't, relax or put your guard down, thinking that the second coming is not going to happen until the Salt Lake Temple is finished. I just wouldn't do that. I think that there's a lot of people that probably have, as a matter of fact. Most likely people that don't like to think about the second coming, but when they do, it's like, well, he wouldn't come before the Salt Lake Temple is finished. And that would be a perfect time to catch people off guard. Those that should have been watching, should have been prepared, that should have been among the 5 wise virgins. So for all we know, maybe it's just a matter of, as soon as everything with the foundation is put in place and it's now protected against earthquakes, maybe at that very moment, the second coming will happen, even though the dedication may not be for another few months or whatever. You see what I mean? So I wouldn't, I would be careful. I would be careful with that and not say that the second coming cannot happen until it's complete and until it's rededicated. Anyway, continuing, Ben says, to paraphrase, just like the Salt Lake City Temple is being prepared to withstand the ushering in of the millennium, so too should we prepare ourselves for that same thing right now. Yes. And this may just merit another spreadsheet. Well, no, I know what I would do. I would put it on my spreadsheet where I have President Nelson's talks. Let me look at that really quick. I don't think that I've done it yet. I need to make another column here. This is all of his talks. And I think it was 2019 when they announced that they were going to renovate the Salt Lake Temple. I noticed that every single conference, he mentioned the Salt Lake Temple and used it as like an object lesson or a metaphor for us in preparing for the second coming. He did it every single conference, not every single talk, but at least once per conference. Now, that hasn't been the case for a little while, but I think I'm going to go through and I'll put something on here so we can see that he did it however many times in a row. But yeah, that's something that he pushed quite a bit. And I think it was pretty obvious why he was doing that. That we need to be like the Salt Lake Temple and ready for the second coming in the millennium. All right. And then number 3, Elder Gong extended an invitation to direct our own life's movie in a way that will shore up our foundation in Christ before December 31st. Oops. Didn't mean to. Okay, I already did it. I can't undo that now. I don't know what I was thinking. Okay, so to shore up our foundation in Christ before December 31st. While it's not a particularly strange request, I have found that whenever a prophet or apostle extends a challenge with a hard due date, that due date carries with it a warning. A warning of what? I don't know. But with the way things are headed, it wouldn't surprise me that the beginning of next year will bring unexpected spiritual hardships. Yeah, possibly. And yeah, I would agree. They do this from time to time. For example, a challenge to read the Book of Mormon by a certain date. I'm pretty sure it was President Hinckley that asked us to do that. And there are other things like that. However, unlike previous times, things are really interesting right now. We've been covering everything going on in the world and just all these just interesting happenings. So we would probably all do well to take up this challenge to shore up our foundation in Christ before the end of the year. And I'll tell you what, I have no idea how the rest of this year is going to go. But what I can say is how it's already gone. I've been keeping track of it on my second coming timeline in June. If you search the word June on my channel, you'll have a video that comes up where or maybe first half. I can't remember what I titled it, but on June 30th, we reviewed everything that's happened the first half of the year. And a lot of this stuff feels like it was actually years ago because there's been so much that's happened. And then quite a bit has happened just this month in September, especially when we look at my signs, disasters spreadsheet and also Google Earth. I'm not going to pull that up right now, but there's been a lot of disaster in the world. Everything from right here, row 20, all the way up here. Disasters, new disasters. I need to update this. We already covered that in the last video. It does feel like there's a compression of events. So Anyway, I'm going to pay attention to that, and I hope that you do too. Be ready for the end of the year. It's quickly approaching. Be ready for this next general conference because, man, I can't wait to see whatever is said during that conference. All right. So thank you, Ben, here for the email. Oh, wait. I could read into all of it a little much, but these were some impressions I received from the Holy Ghost while listening. Feel free to share with your audience and add your own thoughts. You know, Ben, I don't think that you're reading into it too much. I think there's people that do the exact opposite and ignore it and think that everything's just always normal. You know, the second coming is not going to happen in their lifetime. I don't think that you can. Well, no, you definitely can read in too much. I know that there's the opposite extreme where every single thing, and some people may feel like that's me. That's fine. I don't know. I feel like I have a pretty healthy balance of looking into things and finding meaning in things. Okay, let's move on to the next email. Thank you, Ben. This is from Marie Mason. Subject line is a hinge point. Hi, Jared. I ran across this talk last night and it feels significant. I think you'll agree. This talk was given 40 years ago, this upcoming April, by Gordon B. Hinckley. In it, he describes the action of a hinge point. And in church today, I was reminded that a fulcrum is a hinge point. How effort exerted on our part can bring about something miraculous with God's help if God is our fulcrum. It works in positive and negative ways. He also mentioned in the talk the momentous occasion of the sustaining of two new apostles together, Russell M. Nelson and Dallin H. Oaks, in that it had been 40 years since two members of the Quorum of the 12 had been sustained together, and they were Spencer W. Kimball and Ezra Taft Benson, who both became succeeding presidents of the church. And now, this upcoming spring, it'll be another 40 years since this talk was given. Also interesting to ponder that President Hinckley was the center president between President Benson and President Nelson's presidencies. A lot to ponder there, especially with the topic he chose. It's interesting to see math seemingly highlight this talk. Now I want to review the whole conference. And then she leaves the link for the talk. So let's talk about it. Okay, so this is April 1984. And this is when President Nelson and President Oaks were first sustained to the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. And at that time, President Hinckley was second counselor in the first presidency. Let's read what he said. We have enjoyed a conference that has been remarkable, I think, in a number of ways. The naming of two men to the Council of the 12 on one occasion is something that has not happened in a long while. The last time it happened was 40 years ago when President Kimball and President Benson were so named. And that is interesting. We all know that the number 40 is a significant number in the scriptures. You think about Israel wandering for 40 years. You think about Christ fasting for 40 days. You think about Noah and how the flood lasted 40 days and things like that. In fact, I did a video about the number 40. Let me look it up really quick. Go to my channel. Do a search for 40. And it's simply, the thumbnail just simply has the number 40 on it. And you may want to watch that. It was a good one. This was 5 months ago. But essentially 40, I think most people will usually just like come out and say, oh, it's a number of testing. And yeah, I think that's true. But in another way, I think that it's maybe even more so a number of cleansing. Because, for example, when the flood came, lasted for 40 days and 40 nights, that was a time when the earth was cleansed. By that point, the test was over. The test was before the 40 started. In the case of Israel wandering for 40 years, we know that earlier generation, they all had to pass away before Israel entered into the Promised Land. So again, the 40 years was basically a time of cleansing more than a time of testing. And I'm not saying that it's not a time of testing, but and then in the case of Christ fasting for 40 days and 40 nights, he was tested. He was tempted by Satan, and he passed all those tests, right? He didn't give heed to Satan. He prepared himself for his ministry, his public ministry, and I guess you could say it was kind of a time of in a way cleansing yourself. Not that he was dirty in the first place, but just going through that time of resisting temptation. So, as we apply that to this 40, how there was 40 years between Spencer W. Kimball and Ezra Taft Benson becoming apostles, and then 40 years later having Russell M. Nelson and Dallin H. Oaks become apostles. That is pretty interesting. Was it a time of cleansing? I don't know. A time of testing? I don't know. But now, just like Marie said, now it's been 40 years since that time. Maybe this has been a time of cleansing and testing and separation of wheat and tares. I don't know. But I will tell you a few things. There's some really interesting things that happened at this time when they were called to the apostleship. And I've done separate videos about this, but let me just do kind of a recap. Okay, we need to go here. Okay, so we have to go back to January 11th, 1983. On that day, Elder LeGrand Richards of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles passed away. Okay, and so that left a vacancy. And to track that through time, I put that in column J, where it says Elder Richards spot vacant. Okay, so that happened. And one conference goes by and there's still a vacancy. A new apostle was not called that April because President Kimball's health had declined. And he was, for all intents and purposes, basically incapacitated. So April General Conference goes by. October General Conference goes by. And there's still this vacancy. And then, very interestingly, exactly 1 year later to the day, Elder Mark E. Peterson of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles passed away. Exactly a year later, on January 11th, 1984. So now, if you remember the church at that time, you might be like, oh no, what do we do now? Because if President Kimball, if he declines even more, he may never call another apostle before he passes away. In fact, the way that it went is that President Kimball, back in 1982, April 1982, that was his last General Conference address. So since that time, he was not able to speak in General Conference as all this is going on with these two apostles passing away. Well, it just so happened that, and it's recorded in, where is it? This LDS Living article, The Miracle Behind President Nelson's Call as an Apostle. And this is written by Sherry Dew. She talks about how for a short period of time, a really small window of time, he kind of became lucid and he wanted to talk to President Hinckley. He called him at 2:30 a.m. on the Wednesday before that General Conference. And then simply said, call Nelson and Oakes to the Quorum of the 12 in that order. So had it not been in that order, if he hadn't specified that, then it may have been that we would have had President Oakes as the president right now of the church. But whenever it comes to these things, it's always inspired. The Lord's always directing it. So President Nelson was supposed to become president of the church. And so that's what happened. Let's go back to the timeline. What's also interesting is that just a couple months after LeGrand Richards passed away, we had this incredible flooding in downtown Salt Lake City. And I've done a video about that before, the 1983 Salt Lake City flood. And I pulled up this article just so you can kind of see. This is from KSL.com. Looking back at the 1983 flood that sent a river through downtown. And you have some pretty incredible pictures. The one that I like the most is probably this one, where you see how close the flooding got to the Salt Lake Temple. That's how close it was. And then, well, maybe even closer, because this is North Temple, the street of North Temple, on the north side of the temple, and this is the church office building. So it was really, really, really close, right? So you have this very unusual event that took place where streets were turned into rivers. Yeah, I guess because of flash flooding in a sense, but they were able to direct the water flow by doing the sandbagging, as you can see here. But it's interesting that happened when you had this vacancy open. And this was President Nelson's vacancy, right? He filled in Elder LeGrand Richards' spot. So LeGrand Richards passes away, and then there's a flood. And then after that, you have President Oakes' spot open up when Marky Peterson passed away. Exactly 1 year later, after LeGrand Richards passed away. I don't know if there's any sort of foreshadowing in that, but there might be. Almost as though you could say it's like you have President Nelson first, and then you're going to have the flood, which would correspond to the second coming. And then after that, President Oakes becoming prophet. I don't know, and I don't think that it's ever been specified exactly how things are going to be after the second coming. What we do know for sure is that Christ is going to take all the keys. And I think when he does that, it's in the sense that, okay, so right now, the priesthood keys are administered by Adam. And that's how it's been since the beginning of the world. Adam has been the one that presides, and it's under his direction that priesthood keys are given. Okay. And so when Christ comes, it's going to, that role, that responsibility, is going to be handed over to Christ, and he's personally going to administer the priesthood keys. I don't think that means that all of a sudden nobody else has keys or holds keys. I think that he essentially just steps into that seat that Adam is currently in. Anyway, and we've read the quote from Joseph Smith talking about how Christ and the resurrected saints, they're probably not going to be on earth most of the time, but they'll come when it's necessary to do things, or they can come at their own pleasure. But probably most of the time during the millennium, they're not going to be here. So in his absence, when Christ goes on to do whatever that he needs to do, I would imagine that there'd probably be one person that would act as a representative. And so that's why I think that we would probably still have a president of the church during the millennium. I'm not sure though, but if that's the case, maybe the first one will be either President Nelson or President Oaks. I don't know, but that's what I'm thinking about when I'm looking at this thing here. President Nelson's spot opening up, you have a flood, and then after the flood, you have President Oaks' spot that opens up. Interesting to think about. Back to the email. Let's talk about hinge point. Okay. Let's go here. Let's go down a little bit. All right. This is later in the talk. President Hinckley says, as we are about to separate, I should like to emphasize the importance of watching the little things in our lives. Have you ever noticed a large gate in a farm fence? This is me talking. Yeah, actually, I have. In fact, when we first moved here, that was the very first thing that my girls did is they broke the hinge on the fence, our cattle gate. Because it like swings wide open. And so them being kids, they're like, oh, that looks fun. And so they wanted to swing on it. And yeah, it bent one of the things. So I had to replace it. And, I was a little bit upset because we just barely got there. I was excited just to have the homestead, and immediately something gets broke. Anyway, continuing with this talk, as you open it or close it, there appears to be very little movement at the hinge, but there is great movement at the perimeter. Speaking to the prophet Joseph Smith in 1831, the Lord said, out of small things proceedeth that which is great. From D&C 64:33. It is so with good or evil, my brothers and sisters. So it's interesting that when he's talking about a hinge point, he notices that detail that when you're really close to it, it doesn't seem like a lot's happening, but way out there, there's actually a lot of movement, right? So let's remind ourselves of where we've heard hinge point used recently. There's been a few times. So one time was at the dedication of the Rome-Italy temple. In fact, they use that term in the title of this article on Church News. President Nelson, a hinge point in the history of the church. Okay, let's read some of this. During a historic interview in Rome, the ancient and great city where 2 millennia ago Peter and Paul preached and died, President Russell M. Nelson called the dedication of the Rome-Italy temple, quote, a hinge point in the history of the church, end quote. So if we think about it in the context in which President Hinckley used that term, then it's like the dedication of the Rome-Italy temple, it may just be like, oh yeah, it's another temple, it's a really important one because it's in Rome and because of the history of Rome. And there's another world religion that's headquartered there, a really big and powerful one. So yeah, it's interesting, but maybe there's a lot more that went along with that than maybe what we realize at the moment. It's like what Elder Holland said when he said that sometimes we're so close to history that we fail to recognize that it's happening. And so there may be a lot more that happened with that and is happening than what we realize. And then continuing, President Nelson says, things are going to move forward at an accelerated pace. The church is going to have an unprecedented future, unparalleled. We're just building up to what's ahead now. Later on, after the photographs, President Nelson looked forward with characteristic energy and optimism. The many historic firsts of the weekend were, quote unquote, only the beginning, he said. All right, historic first, only the beginning. And that's true. That's true. When you think about places like United Arab Emirates that's going to receive a temple, Shanghai, China, in that sense, there's more that happened after the Rome, Italy, like these these kind of like unlikely and important locations. In of course, not just temple dedications, but other things too. Okay. And then in this article, this is on the church website, Church News. President Nelson calls Rome temple dedication a hinge point in church history. There's a quote from Elder Bednar. Elder David A. Bednar of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles said, quote, "Everything in the restored gospel of Jesus Christ focuses on him and his ordinances and covenants, period. End of sentence. Exclamation point. And that is what will take all over." He said, this marks, quote, "the beginning of something very majestic." And President Nelson has already highlighted the fact that this experience here is a hinge point, not just for the church in this temple district, but in all the world. So that's interesting because he emphasizes that this is a really big thing. It's going to have a big impact, right? The beginning of something very majestic. I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. You know, why would the Rome, Italy temple be so important? And again, I have my own ideas. It's because that's where the main church, you know, after the Great Apostasy, the church that kind of won, the one that became the biggest and most powerful, the one that had the people not rebelled and not killed the prophets, you know, if that church had remained, not that it ever really was going to happen, but essentially this church filled that void. And it's been in Rome ever since. So it's important for that reason. I don't know, but I'd be open to any other reasons or any other thoughts that you have. But according to Elder Bednar, it's the beginning of something very majestic. And President Nelson said that it was a hinge point. All right, next. President Nelson used the term hinge point again. In this article on Church News, President Nelson extends important invitation to all Latter-day Saints in 2020. All right. So this was in a social media post. Okay. He says, this is in preparation for the April 2020 General Conference. Select your own questions, design your own plan, act on any of these invitations to prepare yourself for sharing the important messages of the ongoing restoration. It is your personal preparation that will help April's General Conference become for you not only memorable, but unforgettable. The time to act is now. This is a hinge point in the history of the church, and your part is vital. So this time referring to the April 2020 General Conference as a hinge point. And of course, during that conference, we had a solemn assembly, something that has not happened in General Conference going back to 1942, except for the typical solemn assembly that you have when we have a new prophet, when the previous one passes away, and then we have a new prophet. There was a Hosanna shout in 2000 for the conference center, but it was not a solemn assembly. They did not describe it as a solemn assembly in General Conference. So the only time that there's been a solemn assembly, which of course includes a Hosanna shout in this case, was this General Conference, April 2020. It's unusual. So we did that. We had the new church symbol. Oh my gosh. I'm okay. New church symbol, Hosanna shout, and then we had the new proclamation that came out. All right, let's move on. And then one last time where you have hinge point used. This was October 2020. Hearts Knit in Righteousness and Unity by Elder Quentin L. Cook. And he says, at this 200-year hinge point in the history of our church, let us commit ourselves as members of the Lord's church to live righteously and be united as never before. President Russell M. Nelson has asked us, quote, to demonstrate greater civility, racial and ethnic harmony, and mutual respect, end quote. This means loving each other and God and accepting everyone as brothers and sisters and truly being a Zion people. And of course, that's going to be something that's important to be received by the Lord, because if we are not one, if we are not Zion, which is one in heart and one in mind, and the pure of heart, then we are not his. So I feel like in this small statement right here, this small section of this talk, it's like he's saying, look, we're at this 200-year hinge point, and we need to be ready for the second coming. We have to be a Zion people. And that's it. All right. And actually this video is going long. I'm not going to have time to go over that last part of the video where I was going to go over this misconception. So I'll just save that for the next video. But thank you guys for sending the emails, Marie and Ben, and everybody else that submits comments and emails. I appreciate it. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.